First of all, Yasher Kaya, the Rav, for the invitation and opportunity to come in here and speak. I consider myself part of the Ahavas Torah community. Way back when, I think back in Muzhayr when I first started. And then davening obviously at the top of HSBC for many years, with my children as well. The Ahavas Banim programs and being Nenda from the Ahavas Torah and the Tzibur here in many, many ways. So I consider it to be a big honor to be back here. I remember davening in HSBC when the sign went up for the new building, big picture in the back, and it seemed like a dream, a fantastical dream, something that people probably doubted would ever happen. So it's really something special to come here and see the realization of that dream, to see the Makom Torah, the learning of the Torah takes place here, and Yasher Koyach, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I also wanted to mention tonight happens to be the Yard Center of Shan Shafal Hirsch. Some of the ideas that we'll talk about tonight are brought down in his Svarim. I didn't realize it when I accepted to speak, but it is his Yard Site tonight, and some of the ideas we'll touch on them as well. We come to Parshas Yetzias Mitzrayim, Makos, Moshe Rabbeinu coming to Parai, and there's this constant back and forth with Moshe Rabbeinu performing Nisim, performing Makos, and that Artuei Mitzrayim seemingly mimicking the Makkah, and thereby Parai's heart getting hardened, and Parai refusing to let Klal Yisrael go free. Right away, the first Makkah, after there was V'yasu Kech Artuei Mitzrayim B'lateyem, V'yechazik Leif Parai V'yishama Aleim Kashadiber Hashem. So they did the same thing B'lateyem. Now, what exactly Lateyem are? Rashi says it means they did things with lachash. They would whisper chants. Rashi also brings an opinion of his Rabbi Yosef that Rabbi Seinu, he says that lachash was some type of power of shadim, of demons. Seemingly, Rashi takes the approach, as many, probably the standard approach, that the people who did the Kishuf of Mitzrayim had certain powers. There was some power of black magic that existed, and that power was able to harness the forces of the Shadim, of the Koyach HaTumah that existed, the Sitra Acher, and be able to manipulate world events in that way. This is that many times we find in Chazal, in parts in Chumash and Agadita Gemaras, and various places where magic seems to be taken literally and a real possible effect. The Ramban, we have a paper here, just to put out some of the Marmakaimis, I don't know if it went around or not, but the Ramban says, why are they called a Kishuf? What's the name Kishuf? Some of the Ramban, the Gemara says, Shemachishim Pamalya Shamalya. They contradict the will and the role of Rebbeinu Shalom. The Ramban takes the approach that Kishuf is real, and what happens is that by using these forces, they counter the normal way things are supposed to work in this world. And the Rebbeinu Shalom wants the world to work in a certain method, a certain way, but the people who do Kishuf, they turn that around. They machish to Rebbeinu Shalom's rotzim. And that's why it's a punishable by death. Someone who's a machshefa, someone who does kishuf, is subject to the death penalty. So the Ramban says that that's because they're seiser, they counteract what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from them. The Ramban then says, "V'ravim yiskasta," many who say, and that there's no such thing as kishuf. It's not real. Magic doesn't exist. The Ramban doesn't say he was referring to over here. We'll see shortly, maybe some hold those opinion. And he says, but you can't deny things that are patently obvious. And apparently, certain events that took place in times of the Ramban seem to indicate that people were able to use magical powers to predict things in the future. He says, there's some deep underlying reason And as we say, it might connect with being able to harness the powers of a Sitra Acher. Now those take this approach, obviously there's a reason very clear why magic is also forbidden. You're doing something against the will of Rebbeinu Shalom, you're using the evil spiritual forces. The question would be is, why don't we see any magic today? Many things that maybe were attributed to magic today can have logical explanations. And the answer would have to be that there's some type of system in place that when there's a tremendous kayach of ruchni, so then there's also a tremendous kayach of tumah that counteracts it. And therefore, in the times of when Nisim were done, which was a ruchniistic thing, so therefore they were also able to go ahead and do things that were which were counter that. Today, when we can't have Nisim anymore, so Zelu Mazeh, the power of the occult was diminished as well. We could see a similar thing that the Rebbeinu Shalom constantly puts things on the even keel. So we have Bechira. Today with the advent of technology, if you would have somebody who would probably come from an earlier time and he would say, how is it possible that people don't learn Torah? We find ourselves in air-conditioned buildings with lights on, with thousands of svarim that are available to us at our fingertips, with all types of new printings and the tremendous amount of knowledge that's available. I once heard from Ramot Weinberg Zatzal, I forget who he said it over from, but he said that the year that the Vilna Shas came out was the same year the dripless candle came out. And this Gadol who was learning with the Vilna Shas and the dripless candle, he said, this is Mamish Olam Haba. What can be better than the Vilna Shas and the dripless candle, right? Learning like that. So if that was Olam Haba, the Vilna Shas and the dripless candle, you can only imagine what they would think of us today. It would probably be hard for many to fathom why people wouldn't spend their time being Isaac and Torah and mitzvahs. But we know Zelu Maseh, the same power that enables us to learn, is also the power that can take our mind away from learning and distract us. There's probably no coincidence that happens. The idea of Bechira is to keep a world that's somewhat balanced so we can choose. The times of Mitzrayim, the times of Beis HaMikdash, we grapple, how can anyone not serve them with the Zara? Go to the Beis HaMikdash, look at all the Nisim that are taking place over there. But the answer is that there was also this Kayach HaTumah that existed concurrently at the same time. However, if we take a look at the Rambam, we see that Rambam takes the approach that magic is not real and magic doesn't exist. The Rambam says, and I'll do the second Rambam first. The Rambam says that Kulan, all these ideas are different sheker v'kazev. They're sheker, they're not true, v'kazev, it's trickery, it's nothing. He says, Kol ha'maymin dvarim ha'elu. Anyone who believes in these things, uki yotzeh b'hen, anything like it, u'mechashe b'libay shen emes, b'divrei chachma, he holds that this is wisdom and chachma and it aval Torah asrasa. You're not allowed to do it because the Meister Torah says it's aser, but the Meister there's some wisdom to it. Any element of ksilim, he's a fool, mechusrei das, he's lacking basic understanding, he's lacking das. So the Rambam very clearly understands that there's seemingly understands there's no such thing as magic. Now the problem is, the Rambam in the preceding halacha says, there's a difference between kishuf and achizas einayim. The Rambam says that kishuf is punishable by death, but achizas einayim is not. Now seemingly achizas einayim means something that is achizas einayim is a sleight of hand, it's a trick. Now, what's the difference in Kishav and Achilles Einayim? If Kishav is a fake, so isn't that Achilles Einayim? So what is the Rambam differentiating between Kishav and Achilles Einayim? So one approach is that perhaps Achilles Einayim is a mirage. Nothing is being done. For example, someone goes out to a field of wheat and says a magical spell, and it looks like the field was harvested. So Achilles Einayim means that nothing was harvested. It's just that the person thinks something was harvested because he's put into a trance. Kishuv means that you actually harvest the field, but you don't tell them how you harvested it. You have it harvested because you have something underneath that cuts it, and you're saying chance, but something's actually happening. Whatever it is, the Rambam seems to make a chilv in Kishuv and Achilles Einayim, which probably needs further elucidation. But the Rambam is very clear that Kishuv is not real. Now, the question is, if Kishuv is not real according to the Rambam, so the question would be is, why is it that we have to, that Kishuv is aser? So if Shlomo Hirsch gives a reason why Kishuv is aser, he says as follows. He says that Kishuv is off. It's not that Kishuv has some intrinsic metaphysical power that makes it awesome. It's that Kishuv is often used for people to achieve things through and get people to do things that are wrong. It's used for illicit things. For example, for some reason, even today you find this concept. If someone's able to predict something and tell you something about you or your past, then all of a sudden people become sold to him and are willing to follow that person. You have a person that goes to a certain person tells him, I see that you have certain nisyonos, I see that you're struggling with certain concepts, and the person says, oh my goodness, this person can see into my heart, you can see into my soul, and all of a sudden this person has people who follow him. Why? Just because he's able to see, assuming that he is able to see. Right? He can say something perhaps as generic as, a person's working in Manhattan, I see that you have a hard time davening mincha with the tzibur in the middle of the winter. How does he know that, right? People get sold on that, and they follow them. Often people who claim these powers use these powers to influence people to follow them. It becomes cult-like, and it leads to things that are not good. So it's not that intrinsically it's something real and a problem. The reason why Kishuv is asur according to the Rambam is because people use it for things that are wrong. In a similar sense, we find by Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is not something that is real. Pagan deities don't have power. Yet, Lamaisa, we know that it's asur. Why? Because people use it for things that are wrong. The idea is wrong. It counters the whole concept of following the Yibana Shoyla. So according to the Rambam, Kishuv is also machish pamalia shomalia. Not by harnessing the powers of Shaitan, but by the people who use it, and the people who say, oh, this power I have, so therefore don't do this mitzvah, follow me, do this aveira, because I have magical powers. That's l'chayit pshat in the Rambam. Meiser Rekeach is bothered. He's really bothered. How could it be that the Rambam denies the possibility of Kishuv? Meiser Rekeach asks a question. He says, look at the case of the Balas Oy, a very famous case in Navi, where we have a person who goes to the Shaul is going to war, and he's nervous, he's scared. So Shaul goes out and he asks the Balas Oy to bring back Shmuel from the dead. He says, I have a Shmuel, I want to know what's going to happen in this war. The Shmuel is apparently brought back from the dead, even though Shaul doesn't recognize him right away, and the Baal Sa'if calls him Shmuel. And then what happens is he says, he asks the Baal Sa'if, he asks Shmuel, what's going to be? And Shmuel says, you're going to die. Tomorrow, imi chatzasi, you're going to be with me tomorrow in Gan Eden, in Olam HaEmes. And Shaul dies the next day. So seemingly you have a clear proof that there is such a concept of magic. And the Meiser Rekeach says, if that's the case, how can the Rambam deny that? And it must be the Rambam doesn't deny magic. The Rambam denies is that magic is used through Shaitan. He doesn't believe that it's used from those type of sources. He believes it's a type of chachma, knowledge that comes from maybe natural things. But it has to be that it exists, even according to the Rambam. And the Rambam uses such strong words and says it's sheker and kazev, and you're silly and not smart for following that. That's because the Rambam wants people to stay away from it. The problem is, if you look, the Meiser Rekeach's challenge, the Rambam is not as strong as it seems to be. Because if you look at the story of the Balas Oy, the Radak over there says that all the Geonim hold that what happened in the Balas Oy was not real magic. They all hold that what took place over there was a fraud, it was a fake. However, there are two approaches. One approach brings to the Shmuel ben Chafnigain, who says that the Balas Oy took a guess. Shaul was going out to war. And she said, you're going to die tomorrow. And he would have come back alive. She would have said, oh, you had a big schus, that's why you survived. You did a mitzvah. But you did a guess. And she was right. And the whole thing is bogus. Shmuel ben Chafnigain learned that way. Strangely, Shmuel ben Chafnigain says, even though the Gemara is mashma not like that, he says the right thing he wants to go with this pshat. Another pshat the Radak brings is that there's no such thing as Balas Oy. But in this situation, Hashem made a nes, based on the Haigain, this is the approach of Haigain and Rav Sadia Gain. Hashem made a nes so that Shmuel could communicate a message to Shaul, and it was a one-off. That's how it worked. So if that's the case, then we really don't have a question on the Rambam from the case of Baal Slave. Because the Maisa, who says that that was a real thing? The whole question of the Maisa Rekeach falls away, and you can learn the Rambam simply. There's another problem which the Rambam as follows, or some apparent difficulty. In Zakdoma and here in Zroim, in the beginning of Pirush Mishnayos, the Rambam tries to explain how you test a Navi. And one of the ways of testing a Navi is the Yipom Advar of Arza. None of the words that he predicts fall to the ground. Every prediction is true. Whatever he predicts to happen in every detail. The Rambam says, how can this be a prediction? We find that there are other people in the world who can make predictions as well. And many of them come true. So the Rambam says that those people cannot predict every single detail. They can predict general events. It's going to rain. They're not going to tell you where. But they're able to tell the future to an extent, but not in detail. But a Navi can tell it in detail, and every detail has to come true. And if a detail doesn't come true, he's not a Navi. So it seems to be for the Rambam Pirush Mishnayos, even though he denies the ability of magic to perform nisim like Dam or Tzvardeya or whatever else might be. But Lamaisi does grant the possibility that certain people have what's called clairvoyance, are able to have a sense of future events. Some might argue that a meteorologist today would have that ability as well. Right? The Rambam does call him like some type of kishuv. But it seems to be that the Rambam does agree that there is some sort of being able to predict things, at least in a vague way, in a general way that certain people have. So even though the Rambam calls kishuv, which means the ability to change things and affect things, in Pirush HaMishlei seems to grant somewhat within clairvoyance, knowing the future. Now, the obvious question is, what does the Rambam do? Or those who hold like him, Shmuel ben Chafni and Sadi Gaim, what do they do with the psukim? We have a Pirush HaPasuk, but Yaskir HaChatum V'Lateyim. The Chatumim went with the V'Lateyim and did kishuv. So how do you ignore the whole pasuk in the Torah? So a key might be as follows. If you look in the pasuk of Kinim, it says, "V'yaskir Chatumim V'Lateyim L'Hoitzias Akinim V'Lo Yachaylim." The Tiakina but Adam Abahim. Rashi says, what does it mean L'Hoitzias Akinim? Rashi says that the Chatumim tried to go ahead and bring out the Kinim. They tried to bring them out from the ground, more Kinim out, and they weren't able to. However, the Bachar Shor says, you know what L'Hoitzias Akinim means? They did the Latayim to get the Kinim out. They didn't want them. Paris, get the Kinim out of here. So they started giving all types of chants, and they went ahead and tried to get them out, and they couldn't get them out. So that's what the Bachar Shor learns. Shamshon Fal Hirsch says that this is really the intent, not just by Kinim, it was by all the Makkos. When it says Vayazkein HaChartumim V'Lateyim, it means they mimic the words of Moshe. Moshe would say something and he would wave his stick, and then the Makkah would come down. So Vayazkein HaChartumim V'Lateyim, they also started chanting and waving. And you know what happened? Vayalo Tzvardeya. Tzvardeya kept on coming out. They didn't stop. So according to Rav Hirsch, Kinim is indication really of what was going on all along. It wasn't shot that they were trying to bring out Kinim or Tzvardeya, or trying to stop them. Now, according to Rashi, you have to know why they weren't successful like Kinim. Why were they not able to stop? What happened like Kinim? Why were other Makkos were successful and like Kinim they were not successful? So simply, Rashi says that magic doesn't work less than a barley. So therefore, Kino was so small it couldn't work. So according to Rashi, somehow in the laws of magic, you weren't able to bring out the Kina from the ground because only by Tzvardeya when it was big, or down when it was big, that's when a spell could take effect on. However, there's another shot as well. There's a famous story, the Gemara brings the Yishalmi, Shim ben Shetach, he went on a campaign, a crusade against witches in Ashkelon. It had a very tragic ending because eventually they framed the child of Shim ben Shetach and was killed by Bezdin. But Shim ben Shetach told them, when you see these witches in Ashkelon, grab them off the ground, hold them up, and bring them to Yerushalayim and we'll have them killed there. The reason why Shim ben Shetach told them to grab them off the ground is because when you're on the in order to do kishuv, apparently your feet have to be rooted on the ground. So according to that opinion, you could also say that by Kinim, because the ground was all Kinim, there was no ground to stand on, that's why it wasn't possible for magic to take place. That would be the Shita of Rashi and the Ramban. And that's why they admitted right now that this is from the Ibn Shlem. According to Shamshon Hirsch, all these Makkos is nothing. They weren't successful. They were not successful in carrying out any makkah. So why did they admit by Kenan that's anybody should? Maybe it was muhsik, it was 3 times they came to that conclusion. Interestingly enough, Rav Hirsch, even though in Chumash, he clearly seems to take the approach of the Rambam. He clearly seems to say that magic wasn't real. And he calls Kishuf comes from the side of Kazay, trickery. Rav Hirsch, in his letter, it's printed at the end of Collected Writings, the last edition, there's a letter where Rav Hirsch discusses Agadah various things, and he writes over there, who is great enough to stick his head between the mountains of the Rambam and the Ramban to decide who is writing Kishuf? He says, who's big enough to be Machriya? Now when he explains it in Chumash, he explains it simply along the lines like the Rambam. He calls Kishuf fake. He says that the stream couldn't do anything. But when it comes to the kid, I couldn't do anything. But in his letter, he clearly writes that this is something that can't be decided. But what's interesting is he says more than that. He says, who has to decide anyway? Because what difference does it make if it's the Rambam or the Ramban? Both ways, doing Kishuf is also, it makes no difference. He says he thinks because it's the Rambam and Ramban, anyone can hold any opinion you want, he said. But why do you have to hold any opinion? And he says the contrary, maybe stand back and say, I really don't know much about this altogether, so I'm not going to have an opinion, which is also a valid approach to have, maybe not so popular today. But that concept of saying, look, my knowledge of magic and my knowledge of these things is not there at all, so I'll just say that the 2 opinions here, I have no idea what the answer is. So those are 2 options that Hirsch offers. This is another interesting thing as well. We find earlier when Avraham Avinu sends Yitzchak when he's dying, it says that Avraham Avinu gave everything to Yitzchak. Avraham is called Shalom Yitzchak B'nai. And then the pasuk says, "Ubnei Pilakshim Asher LaAvraham Nasa Avraham Matanis." The Bnei Pilakshim, Avraham gave gifts. The question is, we gave it to Yitzchak. What gifts are left? There are no gifts left anymore. So Rashi says he gave Kishuf of Ma'aseh Shedim. He gave Shem Tumah. The Gemara says Shem Tumah. Rashi says he taught them Kishuf of Ma'aseh Shedim. The question is, the Gemara has an opinion that says that Kishuf is also to Ben Noach. Why? Because the Gemara pasuk says, don't do Kishuf, because Beklala to Emes Eila, because of Ateius like Kishuf, people were thrown out of Eretz Canaan. So if that's the case, why is Avraham teaching his children Kishuf? So the Maharsha says that it's a machlokes asugis. And it could be the Gemara that says that he taught King Shem Tumah is different. But Lamaisa, even so, it's still shver. Why would you give something that would be evil and wrong? So there are a couple of different mahalchim. One mahalch is Avraham Avinu taught them Kishuf, not that they should practice it. They shouldn't be swayed by it. He knew they were going out to make Kedem, and he knew they're going to see some guy levitating on top of a mountain somewhere. Before you know it, they're going to start following him. They say, Avraham Avinu had some good, nice ideas, but this guy has also some nice ideas over here. Let's go along with him. Look, he can fly. Right? So Avraham Avinu showed them how to fly, and they wouldn't be dispelled from it. That's one shot. Another shot is that he also taught them how to defend themselves against the curse, the magic. In other words, if they go to make Kedem and someone would give them some type of spell on them, they're able to ward off the spell. Those are 2 options. But I once saw from Victor Miller, it's an interesting shot. He said they weren't teaching them magic. He was teaching them things that people would assume were magic. In other words, today, the advent of science and technology, right, there are many things people can do. You can make a car that drives. But if you take that car and you drop it into primitive society, and you tell them, look, I have a horseless wagon that can go with Kishuf. They're like, no way, you can't go. And then I say some magical chants, and I press the gas pedal and it drives. These people are going to be blown away, and they're going to say, wow, this guy has magical powers. I'm going to follow him. So he says, Avraham Avinu just taught them the chachma that underlies these tricks. He taught them that underneath these tricks that look like magic, they're not magic. They're science. And it's always going to make you think it's magic. The guy would go to, they would give him some type of plant to eat, and all of a sudden it's like getting hallucinations. He didn't realize he was giving him some type of hallucinatory thing to eat, and it'll make him think, look, that happened to him. So Avraham Avinu was giving him teaching him the tricks. The tricks, they wouldn't be swayed by it. Perhaps this also would fit in line with the different shatim. If magic is real, then Avraham Avinu probably told them the tricks of magic so that they shouldn't be swayed by it, because it's not something to follow. You have to teach how to ward off evil spells. If magic is not real, it's all a farce. The people which are privy to knowledge of other people aren't, and they present it as magic. You know, someone's sick, you tell them, take this antibiotic and say these chants and it will be healed. So he wanted to show them what that was. It happens to be there's another shot. Rashi says that Shem Tumah, that Rabbi Elias gave to his children, that he gave to the children of Yishmael, went to Eretz Mekedem, Pilakshin went to Eretz Mekedem. So Rashi says Shem Tumah, Rashi says Kisha Ma'aseh Shedim. But Sifsei Echad brings another shot. It says Shem Tumah doesn't mean Kisha Ma'aseh Shedim. What it means is the ability to connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom even in a state of Tumah. When in Eretz Yisrael, it's very easy to connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom. In Eretz Yisrael, it's Kedusha around you. So you can say Shem Hashem, connect, it's Kulei Ruchni. When you go to Eretz Mekedem, you're going to be subject to all types of influences and Tumah that's out there. How are you able to connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom even in a situation of Tumah? Even when the world around you, the society around you, or the influences around you are Tumah, Shem Tumah. How do you connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom in a Shem Tumah? And that's something that Rabbi Elias felt was important to give over to his children when they're going to Eretz Mekedem. If that's the case, it has nothing to do with Kishuf altogether. But perhaps it's a chizuk for us as well, right? We live in society sometimes that doesn't have the same value systems or ideas that we do. And sometimes people can give up and say, you know, Shem Tumah, I'm stuck in a place, I have no way to connect with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Doomed for failure. Avraham tells his children it's not true. Even in a place of Tumah, even when things are not, so to speak, like the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, wherever you are, you can connect with the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's always a way to connect. There's always a place. And of course, all the more so when the city where there are shivas, shuls, kailim, where people are able to come and learn and connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom, no matter what other things can be distracted, what other tumah exists in the world around us. There's a way to do it with the Shem Tumah, and again, it's a real schus to be able to come here and see the connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the ability to come and learn, be part of this Makom Torah, and have an aliyah in Torah. Yeshakayach, thank you.